Hello, everyone. That's right, Title is back. Um, Obviously, a lot of stuff has happened in the past 2 months. That big news will be explained either at the end of the video, depending on how much time I have, or in another video. So stay tuned to the end of this video, and also, you might want to just watch it, because it's going to be pretty epic. So today's video is indeed a school project. However, I got some cool gameplay in here, so most of my normal viewers, stick around. You might see some stuff you like. Obviously, it is going to be a Fortnite video, which is different from my normal content, but hopefully you guys still enjoy. Anyway, let's get into the main aspect of this video. So anyway, we were told to do a passion project, and something I've been pretty passionate about is obviously the Mandalorian, and I'm sure many of you are as well. We all it's really cool. It's like Star Wars, it's just like Western. It's this super cool guy who can just outgun anybody, and obviously, as where the plot is going, it's a pretty interesting story as well. So anyway, I just kind of wanted to sit down and really think about how our beloved Djarin, or the Mandalorian, has developed from episode 1 to the current episode of season 2 that I am now allowed to spoil because, well, it's past Mando Monday. So anyway, let's get into the arc of Mando. He is essentially an overview, I guess you could say. He turns in from basically a ruthless bounty hunter who is very respected. He has a lot of morals, but, if he has a job to do, he's going to do it. No questions asked. To pretty much essentially this protective father who, is protecting this child from all these bounty hunters across pretty much the entire galaxy that are coming after him. So, basically, the main point I wanted to kind of induce here is that he is, with all the characters being introduced, Din's kind of a side character at this point, and he is being led, his character is being led by Grogu, who has developed him into the person he is in the most current episode. So anyway, let's get into the main arc. We see in episode 1 that the Mandalorian is an absolute terror. He is pretty much a space cowboy version of John Wick, Clint Eastwood, all of these lone wolf character kind of aspects. He works alone. He doesn't have any real relationships with anyone. But this is mostly because of his childhood. His parents were killed by separatist droids before the Empire really took over. If you guys have all seen the main 6 movies of Star Wars, obviously you know how the Clone Wars and then the Empire rises, all of that. So this all takes place after the Empire falls, but Din is obviously quite old at this point. Not too old, but, a good middle-aged man. So he did live probably around the end of the Clone Wars. So, anyway, the super battle droid had basically killed his parents in an explosion, but this specific part of Mandalore, the Death Watch, had taken him in as an orphan and taught him pretty much the creed and everything. And I will go into that later because his creed is directly tied into his morals and his emotional walls that he puts up. Which also another good thing to tie into is how I actually learned this from a director's cut from Dave Filoni and John himself, who writes the show. And, obviously we all love them because they pretty much saved Star Wars at this point. But they essentially told, they said in the episode that obviously Mandalorians are renowned for their armor. People look at him and they're like, oh, that's a Mandalorian. And there's very few of them. So they usually keep on their helmets to preserve their identity kind of thing and make them seem like more in numbers. So anyway, his armor symbolizes his character. He is very lonely. He doesn't want any real like human kind of contact with anyone. He doesn't trust a lot of people. He doesn't want to show them what's inside. And that's what his armor does physically and emotionally for Din Djarin, as we see throughout the series. I mean, there's more than just his creed that's keeping that helmet on, because we see in episode 4 that he finds a lovely widow on this planet, that we see the emotional struggle inside of him, that he really wants to just settle down. But, you know, obviously, as his arc is led by Grogu, he has to protect Grogu. And so he has to continue moving on. He can't really take his helmet off and physically and emotionally and just enjoy. He's got to continue his job. He's got to continue his promise and what he did. So anyway, let's talk about how I'm going to talk about the specific episodes that have developed his character the furthest. Obviously, he develops through all of them, but these are the most impactful, in my opinion. Obviously, episode 1, because we see who he is before Grogu is in his life. We see that he's pretty ruthless. We see that he does have morals, but if there's a job to do, he's going to do it. He's not going to focus on any other, he doesn't care about the person that's being hunted. If they ask for mercy or they say, I'll pay you. No, he's going to do the job because he kind of keeps his promises. And he's very determined and strong-willed as well. So, anyway, basically, already at the end of episode 1, we see a bit of a change because he kills. He has to work with a droid, which he already hates droids for previously said reasons. And he has to work with an IG droid to get the target, or Grogu. And obviously, he has to not only work with something he doesn't like, but he also has to deal with his incompetence. You can tell that he's really annoyed with the droid's programming and how it really can adapt to any situation. But essentially, the droid's programming, which is what Din hates in the beginning about droids, is basically said, hey, I've got to kill this child and must be terminated. And so this is when we really see Din flick a switch. And he essentially just goes on and says, you're not doing that, shoots the droid in the head, and now he's on the run with a baby. That's essentially what's happened. So episode 2 is not major for his development, in my opinion, but we do see that Baby Yoda, or Grogu, whatever you want to call him, is that he saves Din from a mudhorn. I mean, Din's about to die. He's about to get ran by essentially a rhino. And Grogu uses the Force to stop it so Mando can impale the mudhorn. And so it's really interesting because you see that obviously Grogu didn't know that Mando was his enemy, quote unquote Mando. But this is where also Mando flicks another switch because hey, this kid protected me, maybe I should protect him too. And we see this in episode 3 where he does do the job. He gets his payment in Beskar, which he later turned into his armor. But we see him go back for Grogu, which is something we really wouldn't have thought of if we had seen him from the beginning of episode 1, and had he not changed, or had we not seen the progression of his change, we would have been really surprised. But we do see him kind of turn into that, start turning into that father archetype as he goes back and pretty much kills all these stormtroopers, all this Imperial group, and, get his kid back. And so we skip to the end of season 1. Moff Gideon obviously wants Grogu, now we know, for his blood, and then is going to kill Grogu once he has no use of him. But at that point, we don't know exactly what he wants. All we know is that Moff Gideon wants Grogu. And so we go through the whole arc of the end of the end of season 1. But we see Din develop into still pretty overprotective, but he has become a decent father, which most would say is big enough development. And, obviously we see his face for the first time because the droid has been reprogrammed as a nurse droid, and obviously saves Din, which also develops his character as he no longer just hates droids outright. He kind of treats them like people and, can sort of live with them, but he still doesn't trust them. So then we're going to skip to season 2. he's pretty much in an RPG video game campaign based mission at this point. He's just being sent everywhere. Every episode feels like a side mission or a main mission, like that kind of a thing. And most would say it's annoying. I would say it's fairly interesting because I would be annoyed as heck at this point. I'm like, can we just get to the part where I give the kid back to his parents? But no, he's just constantly going everywhere. So the most impactful I think I've seen him change was in the episode, I forget which chapter it was exactly, but where Bo-Katan shows up. Bo-Katan from the Clone Wars and Rebels is the rightful heir, in my opinion, to the throne of Mandalore. She is not part of Death Watch, which is the clan that Djarin was part of, but she explains to Din Djarin that he's not the only Mandalorian group out there. So, obviously, I forgot to mention this, but at the end of season 1, in the last episode, his entire group, his family, his clan was slain. I mean, he has no Mandalorians at this point. That's why he's looking for more Mandalorians anyway. So he does find Mandalorians, they're just not part of his group. He realizes this once they take their helmets off, and he's like, hey, where'd you get that armor? And she explains to him that it's been passed down for generations. This is what she's part of, that kind of thing. And he learns that, there's not only one Mandalorian. There's multiple Mandalorian groups out there, which also internally, we didn't realize it yet, but it kind of helps him make this impactful decision that I will talk about in a bit. But basically, that episode also changes him obviously deep internally, and Bo-Katan sends Mando to Ahsoka Tano, who is a Jedi, obviously the Jedi Padawan of Anakin Skywalker. She is still alive at this point, and she says, I cannot train him because Grogu has an attachment, a father-son attachment to Din at this point. And she's like, I've seen this relationship, the way a Jedi has loved people like this before. Obviously, she's referring to Anakin and how he turned to Darth Vader. And she doesn't want to be part of Grogu going down that path. So he makes a deal with her to help her with her problem on Corvus. She sends Grogu to the Seeing Stone. And then this is one of the bigger developments we see is that in episode 14, we see Mando kind of sorrowful. We see a distressed tone in his voice. He's like, don't you want to learn more of that Jedi stuff? You have to promise me you're going to go with them if one comes for you, right? Like, we just kind of see him trying to convince himself and Grogu as well that they're going to have to do it. They're going to have to go through the pain. However, at the end of episode 14, Grogu's captured by Moff Gideon, and this is when Mando kind of turns into Big Daddy mode. So episode 15, which is this week's episode, I'm not spoiling it. You guys have just took too long to watch it. So this is the biggest growth in his character. Obviously, he has to find out the location of Moff Gideon's ship to find Grogu again, and so he grabs his band of people together. But he has to sacrifice his creed. He takes his helmet off. That's really where you can see the father-son relationship. He sacrifices his creed. He's essentially, to his old creed, no longer a Mandalorian because he revealed his face to some Imperials. But he did it for Grogu. He wanted to save Grogu. So he basically shoots his way out of the base once he gets the intel, and basically he kills everyone who saw his face, and then also he got help from one of his crew members, but they pretended to die so that his creed is still alive. And then we see at the end of the episode that he mocks Gideon in the exact words he says, and basically tells Moff Gideon that he is coming for him. And that's really his growth at this point so far. And it's really cool to see, in my opinion. And yeah, we'll just see how the arc continues from here. And yep, that's pretty much his arc from this point, guys.